Thanks for having me. When I was there we go. When Susan contacted me about participating in today and gave me a bit of a brief about what she wanted me to talk about, and it was around crisis recovery, certainly, and responding to your own self-care and the care of others, I was reminded of how often I spend time with other practitioners. I'm a social worker, reminding them of what crisis actually is. We spend a lot of time, certainly in the media, referring to environmental crisis, bushfire crisis, health crisis, and we tend to get very caught up in the event. And so this is my way of reminding myself and perhaps you that when we look at my definition, it's a lot more attention paid to the responses to the event. That's the crisis, not the event. And therefore, all of us are going to be feeling it at different speeds, different complexities. And I can only follow on from my former speakers, and I'm glad we're all on the same page when we talk about recovery. But certainly it was my way of defining that as far as our response to the event, not the event itself. The other thing that occurred to me when getting off the phone was, okay, well, I know about self-care and I know about the care of carers, and I was mucking around on a whiteboard thinking, okay, how am I going to tell this story in my brief time? And which is always daunting when you're talking on behalf of so many people, I imagine, that are in the room as carers and as leaders. But it seemed to me very clearly that soon after that I was actually talking about the same thing. When I talked about self-care, I was talking about the principles that guide my work when I work with carers. So I have one list. But before I get on to my 4 categories and we get on with the day, I too will tell you a story that I think really helped me make sense of this world of caregiving, this enormous world of caregiving. And that was when I left Lifeline in Melbourne as the trainer and supervisor, and I then moved to Bendigo with my family to become the supervisor and trainer there. And I was pretty happy when I got the job, feeling pretty cocky, pretty happy with myself, and sat down with the CEO on the first day and said to him, how can I do the job well? And he said, okay, well, I can't give you a direct answer. Because he said it's going to take a lot of kind of paradoxical or binary tasks. I want you to be approachable, reflective, accessible, door open kind of person, always available, because we ran 24 hours a day back then with people coming and going. But he said, I also want you to be contained, deliberate, assured, defined. You got that? And I went, okay, yeah, I think I've got that. And he said, and the other thing is I want you to do is roll with the punches. Anything can happen around here. A lot won't, but a lot will. So just roll with it, Jill. Be flexible, take your time, befriend these people. They come from all walks of life. Okay, I said, what's the other flip side? He said, well, I don't want you to be their friend. You're not here to be their friend. You're here to contain, consolidate, give really clear feedback about what's working. I said, so you want me to be very friendly and accessible, but not anyone's friend? He said, you are so across this. And I think and it dawned on me that what a wonderful boss he was going to be, because he kind of got it and he got my role. But he encapsulated, by being quite humorous, what it is to be a carer and a leader in crisis recovery, that you are trying to hold very disparate positions at the same time. So I'm going to try and pick this up again and get it moving. So in my workshop today, I want to kind of condense into that world of paradox and binary tasks. I'll be talking about the responsibility we have as leaders to model self-care. If you're doing it for yourself and you can model it to others, it's contagious. I don't know about you, but I've hung around with people who don't do it very well, and I didn't learn a thing. I've hung around with people who are great at self-care, and I learned everything about how precious and important it is. So I'll be talking about modelling. I'll also be talking about the importance of, as a leader of and a carer of carers, establishing and maintaining boundaries. It's a real cliche, I know, but I couldn't come up with anything else. And that's being very clear about what your role and responsibilities are, what your organisation's asking you to do. Because if you're steadfast, if you've got ballast, you can roam. But if you're all over the shop and you're knocked around, people are watching and they really want you to be as solid as you can. And I don't think that can just come out of being self-caring in another yoga class. I think that's about you having a very clear idea about what you can do and what your boundaries are, because you will be watched. And the last two I'll be talking about, that whole dilemma, and I teach as well, certainly in this area, and often people say, I don't know anything about crisis recovery. You know, I've heard someone like Rob Gordon speak, and people like Rob know so much, and I wish I knew as much as Rob. If only I knew, I'd be so much better at what I do. And my response is always, you know, are your expectations realistic for the role that you have? Because sometimes simply shutting up and listening is all you need to do. It's the hardest thing I do every day, is to just shut up and listen. I still have to work at it. So having a realistic awareness of what you're being expected to do, and that then follows through to your carers, because if they've got realistic expectations and boundaries, they then give them to the community. And everybody's kind of contained within what they can reasonably be expecting to take on. And the last one is probably my favourite, is trusting your gut. That whole notion of intuition and practice wisdom, and I think Malcolm kind of summed that up, about not racing in but having a sense of timing. It's so, it's so, you can feel so compelled to feel like you have to do things, but often just supporting carers to just take a breath. And I'll be talking about some of my examples of, you know, absolutely trusting your gut is only one form of information. Obviously, there's a whole lot of other things that you have to make decisions on. But I appeal to you to say, don't override it, because there's enormous wisdom and knowledge in just trusting your intuitive wisdom and your life experience. So if I see you inside, great. If I don't, have a great day.